The vast expanse of the galaxy in the 40K universe is a realm of boundless opportunity, sprawling ambition, and endless peril. At the heart of its relentless activity lies the ceaseless flow of trade, mighty fleets of merchant vessels laden with resources and technology, traversing the void to fuel the Imperium's insatiable appetite. These arteries of commerce are vital to sustaining the fragile balance of a crumbling empire stretched to its breaking point. Yet, as with all things in the grim darkness of the far future, this lifeblood of civilization is far from safe. For beyond the relative security of Imperial patrols and fortified star systems lies the uncharted, hostile vastness of space. Here, amidst the treacherous tides of the warp and the shadowy depths of the void, chaos reigns, both figuratively and literally. The Immaterium, a realm of malevolent energies and insidious powers, does not merely threaten the spiritual and moral fabric of the galaxy. It also manifests tangible horrors that disrupt and destroy the vital logistics of war, survival, and expansion. Among the most chilling of these threats are the Chaos Ghost Fleets, phantasmal armadas shrouded in mystery, their presence heralding ruin for any who cross their path. These spectral fleets, whispered of in fearful tones by voidfarers and planetary governors alike, embody the very essence of chaos, unpredictable, ruthless, and wholly destructive. Their attacks are not driven by material gain, but by a cruel purpose to spread disorder, fear, and death across the galaxy. The disruption they bring to trade routes is not merely an inconvenience, but a direct assault on the mechanisms that keep entire sectors alive. Starvation, rebellion, and military collapse often follow in their wake, leaving nothing but ruin and despair. As rumors of these ghost fleets spread, they fuel the paranoia that pervades every corner of the Imperium. Are they the remnants of once loyal Imperial forces corrupted by the warp? Are they conjured directly from the Immaterium, manifestations of the Chaos God's whims? Or are they something else entirely, an ancient menace given new purpose in a galaxy already teetering on the edge of destruction? These questions linger unanswered, casting a shadow over every trade convoy and naval patrol that dares venture into the unknown. To understand how Chaos Ghost Fleets affect trade routes, we must first delve deeper into the nature of the players involved, the circumstances that gave rise to this phenomenon, and the lasting scars it has etched into the galaxy. In a universe as vast and unforgiving as 40K, where survival is a daily battle, the impact of these fleets reverberates far beyond the confines of the merchant lanes they haunt. This is the story of how the ghostly specters of chaos turned the lifelines of civilization into pathways of dread, reshaping the galaxy's fragile economy and plunging entire sectors into the abyss. The tapestry of those involved in the phenomenon of Chaos Ghost Fleets is vast, woven from a diverse array of factions, each with their distinct roles in the unfolding of these spectral horrors. At the forefront of the chaos stand the twisted legions of the Warp's servants. These corrupted forces, once noble defenders of humanity, now form the backbone of many ghost fleets. Their crews, tainted by centuries of exposure to the Immaterium, navigate their vessels with an unholy precision, driven not by greed or survival, but by devotion to the dark gods. These warbands exist in countless forms, from splinter groups of larger chaos fleets to renegades with personal vendettas, their ranks swelling with cultists and heretical voidfarers eager to claim their place within the maelstrom of chaos. The vessels themselves play a key role, often being ancient ships that vanished into the warp centuries or even millennia ago, only to return as cursed shadows of their former selves. Their hulls bear the scars of their long imprisonment in the Immaterium, grotesquely warped and alive with baleful energies. These ships are not merely tools of destruction. They are extensions of the Chaos God's will, crafted to sow terror and despair. Each one carries its own unique mark, whether as a relic of a long-forgotten war or a testament to the horrific transformations wrought by the warp. Opposing these ghostly fleets, the Imperium of Man emerges as both a victim and an unwilling participant in the conflict. The vast trade networks of the Imperium are critical to its survival, and thus the Adeptus Administratum, the Navis Imperialis, and the Imperial Navy are all forced to contend with this elusive threat. Bureaucrats work tirelessly to redirect shipping lanes, issue warnings to vulnerable systems, and catalog the chaos left in the fleet's wake. Meanwhile, the Imperial Navy is tasked with engaging these spectral threats, an unenviable duty fraught with danger, as the ghost fleets often elude detection or strike without warning. Despite their efforts, the naval forces find themselves overwhelmed by the sheer unpredictability and scale of the menace. The Mechanicus also plays a notable role, its obsession with technology leading to efforts to study and contain the cursed vessels. Tech priests see the ghost fleets as both a dire threat and a source of potential knowledge. They dispatch exploratory fleets to recover what remains of lost vessels or analyze traces of warp corruption left in their wake. The information gleaned from these studies could be instrumental in understanding how chaos exerts its influence over the physical realm, yet it also exposes the Mechanicus to the same corruption they seek to study. Pirates and rogue traders add another layer of complexity to the picture. While many traders seek to avoid regions plagued by chaos ghost fleets, others view the disruptions as opportunities. Rogue traders, operating outside the strict boundaries of Imperial law, might attempt to salvage derelict vessels or profit from supplying isolated worlds cut off by the attacks. In their pursuit of profit, some even risk direct engagement with the ghost fleets, often underestimating the dangers of such encounters. Pirates, on the other hand, exploit the confusion caused by these fleets to raid weakened convoys, further compounding the devastation wrought on trade routes. The warp itself, as a living, malevolent presence, could also be considered a participant. It is the stage upon which the ghost fleets exist and operate, its tides shaping the routes they take and the devastation they leave behind. The warp's unpredictable nature allows chaos to strike without warning and retreat without a trace, making it impossible for the Imperium to respond effectively. Navigators, the gifted psychers who guide ships through the warp, face unparalleled challenges in regions plagued by ghost fleets as the Immaterium becomes more volatile and hazardous in their presence. Lastly, the ordinary citizens of the Imperium are not merely bystanders, but unwilling participants in this saga. The traders, voidfarers, and planetary governors who depend on stable trade routes to survive are thrust into a struggle far beyond their comprehension. Their pleas for aid often go unanswered, their resources stretched to the breaking point as they face the fallout of chaos incursions. The resilience of humanity is tested anew as entire sectors teeter on the brink of collapse, their fate intertwined with the actions of those who hold power and those who seek only to destroy it. This intricate web of players, from the corrupted forces of chaos to the desperate defenders of the Imperium, forms the foundation upon which the impact of chaos ghost fleets unfolds. Each faction, whether through action or inaction, contributes to the unfolding narrative of terror and survival, their roles setting the stage for the conflict that will determine the fate of countless lives and worlds. The rise of chaos ghost fleets as a significant menace to trade routes is deeply rooted in the galaxy's turbulent history and the inherent fragility of interstellar commerce. This threat is not a sudden occurrence, but rather the culmination of millennia of conflict, corruption, and the relentless expansion of the Imperium's domain. It is the byproduct of humanity's over-reliance on unstable systems, the encroachment of chaos, and the inherent vulnerabilities of the warp, which serves as both a lifeline and a mortal danger for interstellar travel. The Immaterium has always been an essential yet perilous aspect of life in the galaxy. Ships must traverse this alternate dimension to bridge the incomprehensible distances between star systems. However, this reliance on the warp has bound humanity's fate to a realm of chaotic energies and unpredictable phenomena. From the earliest days of human expansion into the stars, the warp was both a tool and a threat. but the steady rise of chaos as a dominant force has turned it into an ever more hostile environment. The Immaterium became increasingly volatile as the Chaos Gods gained power, resulting in the frequent disappearance of ships and entire fleets, many of which later re-emerged as twisted, corrupted versions of their former selves. The seeds of the Ghost Fleet's emergence were sown in the countless wars and calamities that defined the Imperium's history. The Great Crusade, the Horus Heresy, and subsequent millennia of endless conflict left a legacy of abandoned ships, stranded fleets, and shattered armadas drifting in the warp. Many of these vessels, originally intended to secure humanity's dominance over the galaxy, became lost in the tides of the Immaterium, where they were exposed to its malevolent influences. Over time, these derelict fleets fell under the sway of chaos, their crews succumbing to the whispers of the dark gods and their ships transforming into horrific instruments of destruction. Another key factor lies in the galaxy's inherent instability. The Imperium's vast bureaucracy, stretched to its limits, is ill-equipped to monitor or maintain order across its countless sectors. This systemic weakness allowed chaos to exploit gaps in the Imperium's defenses. Isolated systems and vulnerable trade routes became prime targets for chaos incursions. The lack of centralized coordination, coupled with the Imperium's slow response times, ensured that once chaos forces gained a foothold, they could entrench themselves and expand their influence unchecked. The decay of ancient technologies also played a critical role. Many of the systems used to navigate the warp, maintain communication, and safeguard ships from its dangers were relics of a bygone era, poorly understood and prone to failure. As these technologies became increasingly unreliable, entire sectors were left vulnerable to warp-based phenomena. This technological decline created ideal conditions for ghost fleets to proliferate, as the Imperium struggled to maintain control over its trade routes in the face of mounting internal and external pressures. Furthermore, the proliferation of warp storms and anomalies over the millennia has destabilized traditional trade routes. These phenomena, often attributed to the growing influence of chaos, have forced trade fleets to take increasingly dangerous and uncharted paths through the warp. The unpredictability of these new routes has made it nearly impossible for the Imperium to provide effective protection, leaving merchant vessels vulnerable to attacks from ghost fleets and other warp-spawned threats. Cultural factors within the Imperium also contributed to the situation. The widespread fear and superstition surrounding the warp and chaos often led to a reluctance to address the threat directly. This avoidance allowed the problem to fester, as few were willing to risk delving into the nature of the ghost fleets or attempting to counter them. The Imperium's rigid dogma and fear of heresy further hindered efforts to understand or mitigate the threat, as any attempt to study the phenomena was seen as dangerously close to consorting with the enemy. Finally, chaos itself thrives on the fear, despair, and suffering of its victims. The very existence of these ghost fleets is as much a psychological weapon as it is a physical threat. The knowledge that entire trade routes can be disrupted, vital supplies lost, and worlds left to starve without warning creates a climate of paranoia and mistrust. This atmosphere serves to further chaos's aims, as it spreads its influence through fear and destabilization. The emergence of chaos ghost fleets is not the result of a single event, but the convergence of countless factors over millennia. It is a consequence of humanity's dependence on a dangerous and poorly understood system, the exploitation of its weaknesses by chaos, and the inevitable decay of an empire too vast to sustain itself. These fleets are the manifestation of a galaxy stretched to its breaking point, where every fracture becomes an opportunity for destruction. The forces that brought them into existence continue to shape their impact, ensuring that the threat they pose remains a constant shadow over the Imperium's fragile trade networks. The emergence and activity of Chaos ghost fleets can be understood as a sequence of escalating events, each contributing to their growing influence and devastating impact on interstellar trade routes. These events unfold across a timeline marked by incremental disruptions, expanding attacks, and the gradual erosion of Imperial stability in regions affected by these fleets. Initially, the appearance of Chaos ghost fleets was sporadic and shrouded in mystery. Reports of disappearing convoys and the sudden destruction of isolated trade fleets were dismissed as anomalies or the work of opportunistic pirates. At this stage, the Imperium largely overlooked the growing problem, assuming such incidents were rare, localized threats rather than the beginning of a larger pattern. The lack of coordinated response allowed Chaos ghost fleets to establish footholds along less patrolled trade routes, exploiting gaps in the Imperium's sprawling but overstretched infrastructure. Over time, sightings of these spectral fleets became more frequent. Isolated attacks escalated into coordinated assaults on entire sectors as Chaos commanders began to refine their tactics and target critical choke points in the galaxy's trade networks. The ghost fleets often emerged without warning, striking swiftly before disappearing into the warp, leaving destruction and confusion in their wake. This unpredictability created significant challenges for the Imperium, which struggled to react effectively. While certain sectors attempted to mobilize local defense forces, the scattered and disorganized responses were insufficient to counter the growing threat. As the attacks continued, the fleet's influence spread across broader regions of space. Trade routes vital to the survival of frontier worlds became increasingly perilous. Merchant vessels carrying food, medical supplies, and munitions faced higher risks, forcing many to reroute through dangerous or uncharted warp paths. These detours often led to further losses, as ships fell prey to warp storms or wandered directly into the ambushes of Chaos forces. Entire sectors became effectively cut off, with supply lines severed and communication rendered unreliable. The resultant shortages of resources led to widespread suffering, rebellion, and the eventual abandonment of some worlds by the Imperium, which deemed them too costly to save. The next stage in the timeline saw the fleets shifting their focus to larger, more coordinated strikes against Imperial convoys and naval forces. Ghost fleets began targeting high-value assets, such as Forge World shipments, military reinforcements, and tithes bound for Terra. These attacks were calculated not only to inflict material damage, but also to destabilize the logistical backbone of the Imperium. In response, the Adeptus Administratum attempted to establish new trade corridors and strengthen convoy protection through the deployment of the Imperial Navy. However, these measures often proved inadequate due to the fleet's ability to strike unexpectedly and retreat into the warp before counterattacks could be organized. This phase also marked the beginning of widespread psychological warfare. Survivors of Ghost Fleet attacks reported chilling encounters with twisted ships and corrupted crews. The spread of these accounts fueled panic among voidfarers, leading to a decline in available personnel willing to crew merchant vessels. Superstitions about cursed trade routes emerged, further hampering efforts to maintain interstellar commerce. The psychological toll on the Imperium's population was immense, as fear and paranoia took hold across sectors affected by the attacks. In response to these growing challenges, certain regions attempted to develop countermeasures, such as employing smaller, faster vessels that could avoid detection or deploying heavily armed convoys designed to withstand ambushes. These strategies achieved mixed success as the fleets adapted their methods in turn, employing diversionary tactics, warp-based strikes, and other unpredictable maneuvers. The Imperium's inability to match the fleet's adaptability allowed Chaos forces to maintain the upper hand, further entrenching their dominance over key trade routes. Eventually, the attacks reached a point where entire subsectors faced near-total economic collapse. The loss of trade routes critical to sustaining planetary economies and military campaigns created cascading effects throughout the Imperium. Planets cut off from supplies began to falter, their populations succumbing to famine, disease, and internal strife. The strategic value of certain systems diminished to the point where the Imperium chose to abandon them altogether, prioritizing resources elsewhere in a desperate attempt to maintain control over more vital regions. The final stages of this timeline reveal the lasting consequences of Chaos Ghost Fleet's actions. Once stable trade routes became permanently unsafe, forcing the Imperium to reroute commerce through far less efficient paths. The inability to reclaim lost regions of space further emboldened Chaos forces, who continued to exploit the Imperium's weaknesses. As a result, the fleet's presence grew beyond isolated incidents into an enduring menace that reshaped the very fabric of interstellar trade. The sequence of events, from initial attacks to widespread disruption and eventual collapse of entire regions, highlights the insidious nature of Chaos ghost fleets. Their ability to destabilize the Imperium's economy, erode its territorial control, and sow fear across the galaxy underscores the long-term implications of this threat. These events serve as a chilling reminder of how even the most seemingly stable systems in the galaxy can unravel in the face of relentless and unpredictable enemies. The turning point in the saga of Chaos ghost fleets and their effect on trade routes came during a catastrophic incident that forced the Imperium to confront the scale of the threat. A major Imperial trade convoy, designated Helios Sigma, was en route through a critical sector, carrying essential supplies for a series of beleaguered frontier worlds. The convoy consisted of hundreds of merchant vessels, escorted by a significant detachment of the Imperial Navy, including cruisers, frigates, and smaller escort ships. Its mission was vital: to sustain dozens of isolated systems that had been struggling under the weight of shortages and unrest due to earlier Chaos disruptions. The convoy represented one of the most ambitious logistical operations attempted in the region, an effort by the Adeptus Administratum to re-establish reliable trade corridors through a sector that had been plagued by ghost fleet activity for decades. It was seen as a test of the Imperium's ability to counter the growing Chaos presence and restore stability to its trade networks. The planning involved unprecedented levels of coordination, with astropaths transmitting orders across vast distances, naval strategists crafting defensive formations, and merchant guilds pooling their resources to ensure the success of the mission. The convoy's route was meticulously planned, avoiding known warp anomalies and regions where Chaos activity had been previously reported. However, the very scale of the operation made it a tempting target. As the convoy entered a relatively quiet stretch of space that had been deemed safe by Imperial analysts, the ghost fleet struck with devastating precision. Emerging from the warp without warning, they launched a full-scale assault, overwhelming the Imperial Navy's escorts with sheer numbers and unorthodox tactics. The key element of the Ghost Fleet's strategy was their use of warp-spawned phenomena to disorient and isolate the convoy. Entire sections of the fleet were separated as warp rifts opened between them, cutting off communications and rendering coordinated defense impossible. Ships vanished into the immaterium or were torn apart by unnatural energies, their crews left screaming in terror as they were consumed. The few vessels that managed to maintain their cohesion were soon surrounded and systematically destroyed by Chaos warships, which operated with an eerie level of coordination and brutality. Among the destroyed vessels were those carrying irreplaceable supplies, including food, weapons, and medical equipment. The loss of these resources spelled disaster for the systems they were destined to support. Entire planetary populations would later suffer as a direct result of the convoy's annihilation, with some worlds descending into anarchy or falling prey to heretical uprisings. The ghost fleets had not only inflicted material losses, but had also demonstrated their ability to strike at the very heart of the Imperium's logistical efforts, shaking confidence in its ability to protect its own. The destruction of Helios Sigma was more than just a tactical victory for Chaos. It was a psychological blow to the Imperium. The scale of the attack, coupled with the apparent futility of the Imperial Navy's defenses, sent shockwaves through the higher echelons of Imperial command. Regional governors, military leaders, and trade officials were forced to confront the reality that the ghost fleets were not an isolated nuisance, but a coordinated and existential threat to the Imperium's infrastructure. In the aftermath of the attack, a crisis council was convened, drawing representatives from the Adeptus Administratum, the Imperial Navy, and the Adeptus Mechanicus. The Council debated how best to respond to the threat, with proposals ranging from abandoning vulnerable trade routes entirely to launching large-scale military campaigns to eradicate the ghost fleets. Ultimately, a decision was made to prioritize the fortification of key trade corridors, diverting resources away from less critical regions in an effort to secure what little stability could still be maintained. This decision marked a pivotal shift in the Imperium's approach to interstellar trade. Rather than attempting to rebuild all lost routes, the Imperium chose to consolidate its efforts, focusing on protecting strategically important sectors while leaving less significant regions to fend for themselves. The abandonment of these regions was not officially acknowledged, but the implications were clear. Worlds that could not be reliably supplied were effectively written off, their populations left to face starvation, rebellion, or worse. The destruction of the convoy also prompted a re-evaluation of naval tactics. The Imperial Navy began deploying more heavily armed and autonomous fleets to patrol trade routes, sacrificing speed and efficiency for the sake of survivability. At the same time, experimental technologies were introduced in an effort to counter the Ghost Fleet's use of warp-based attacks. These included advanced Geller field generators, psychic detection arrays, and modified weapon systems designed to disrupt the energies of the Immaterium. While these measures achieved limited success, they came at a significant cost, further straining the Imperium's already overstretched resources. The turning point represented by the Helios Sigma disaster marked the moment when the Imperium was forced to acknowledge the full scope of the Chaos Ghost Fleet threat. It was a moment of reckoning that reshaped the galaxy's trade networks and set the stage for the prolonged struggle that would follow. This single event became a grim symbol of the Imperium's vulnerability and the relentless power of chaos, a lesson etched in the ruins of countless ships and the silent cries of billions left to suffer in its wake. The direct impact of Chaos Ghost Fleets on the galaxy is vast, reshaping the delicate balance of power, economy, and survival in regions they target. Trade routes, once considered the lifelines of the Imperium, have become precarious corridors of uncertainty. The immediate consequences of Ghost Fleet activity ripple across all facets of life, from the highest echelons of the Imperium's command to the ordinary citizens stranded on worlds cut off from vital supplies. Entire sectors have become economically paralyzed. The destruction of merchant vessels and supply convoys has led to severe shortages of essential goods. Forge worlds reliant on shipments of raw materials find their production slowed or stopped entirely, impacting the supply of weapons and machinery needed for the Imperium's war efforts. Agri-worlds that export food to hive planets are unable to reach their customers, leaving billions to face starvation. This disruption ripples back to the producing worlds as well, as their economies collapse due to the lack of trade, creating a feedback loop of instability. On many planets, the interruption of trade routes has caused societal breakdowns. Hive cities, where populations rely entirely on off-world imports, are particularly affected. With no reserves of food or medical supplies, these densely packed metropolises quickly become cauldrons of desperation and chaos. Riots, looting, and widespread violence erupt as the population competes for dwindling resources. The Adeptus Arbites and planetary defense forces, often overwhelmed, struggle to maintain order, and many worlds descend into anarchy or rebellion. The Imperium, stretched thin by countless other conflicts, is often unable to respond, leading to the complete collapse of once thriving systems. For frontier worlds, the impact is even more devastating. Isolated by design, these planets rely heavily on regular supply convoys to sustain their populations and maintain minimal defenses. When trade routes are disrupted, these worlds are effectively abandoned, left to fend for themselves against environmental challenges, alien threats, and internal strife. Many are unable to recover, their populations dwindling until the planet is little more than a desolate wasteland. The military implications are equally dire. The loss of trade routes has left entire battlefronts undersupplied, compromising the Imperium's ability to wage war against its countless enemies. Reinforcements, ammunition, and replacement vehicles fail to arrive, leaving beleaguered regiments to hold their positions with what little they have left. In many cases, this results in the collapse of defensive lines, allowing Xenos incursions, heretical uprisings, and other hostile forces to advance unchecked. The inability to support distant campaigns also forces the Imperium to abandon strategic objectives, ceding territory to its enemies and losing critical footholds in contested regions. The psychological toll on the galaxy's population is profound. The attacks of Chaos Ghost fleets are not merely physical assaults, they are acts of terror designed to instill fear and hopelessness. Survivors of such attacks often speak of the unnatural horrors they witnessed: ships twisted into grotesque shapes, crew members transformed into monstrous beings, and the eerie silence that follows the destruction. These tales spread rapidly, fueling paranoia and undermining morale. Merchant guilds struggle to recruit crew for their ships, as fewer are willing to risk their lives in regions known to be haunted by ghost fleets. This exacerbates the already dire situation, further restricting the flow of goods and resources. The Imperium's political structure is also destabilized. Planetary governors and sector lords, unable to secure their territories, face growing dissent from their populations. Many are forced to divert resources from other critical needs to fortify their systems against potential attacks, weakening their ability to contribute to the larger Imperium. Some worlds, feeling abandoned by their rulers, begin to question their loyalty to the Imperium. This sentiment creates fertile ground for heretical movements and chaos cults, which take advantage of the instability to gain influence and spread their corruption. The warp itself grows more treacherous in the wake of ghost fleet activity. Trade routes that were once stable become riddled with anomalies and unpredictable dangers, making navigation nearly impossible. Even experienced navigators struggle to guide ships through these regions, their psyches strained by the malevolent presence of chaos. Warp storms, rifts, and other phenomena spread like a plague, effectively cutting off entire sectors from the rest of the galaxy. These disruptions are not merely the result of natural warp instability, but a deliberate strategy by chaos forces to exert their dominance and prevent the Imperium from regaining control. The chaos extends beyond the Imperium's borders. Xenos factions, many of whom rely on trade or face similar challenges in navigating the warp, are also affected by the presence of ghost fleets. While some see this as an opportunity to exploit the weakened Imperium, others suffer equally devastating consequences, finding themselves unable to maintain their own supply lines or expand their influence. This creates a chaotic and unpredictable galactic landscape, where alliances and rivalries shift as rapidly as the tides of the warp. Overall, the impact of Chaos Ghost fleets on trade routes is not limited to immediate destruction, but reverberates through every aspect of the galaxy. They represent not just a threat to commerce, but a destabilizing force that undermines the very foundations of the Imperium and its ability to sustain itself. Each attack compounds the challenges faced by the Imperium, further eroding its power and leaving entire sectors vulnerable to collapse. The galaxy, already teetering on the brink of ruin, is pushed ever closer to the abyss with every ship lost and every trade route abandoned. The Chaos Ghost fleets possess characteristics and employ tactics that make them uniquely terrifying, both in their impact on trade routes and in the broader context of the galaxy. Among the most intriguing and debated aspects is the role of the warp in their operations, not merely as a realm of travel, but as an active, unpredictable force that shapes and empowers these fleets. The warp's influence manifests in ways that defy conventional understanding, making these fleets far more than simple raiders or pirates. They are weapons of terror and corruption wielded by the Chaos Gods. One of the most frequently discussed aspects in fan communities is the nature of the ships themselves. Many of these vessels are thought to be ancient Imperial ships that vanished into the warp, only to re-emerge centuries or millennia later, warped beyond recognition. Their hulls appear to be alive, covered in pulsating organic growths or glowing runes that emit an unnatural light. These ships often show signs of damage that would render any conventional vessel inoperable, yet they continue to function, driven by forces that defy technological explanation. This visual horror adds a layer of psychological warfare to their attacks, as survivors of encounters with these fleets often describe them as nightmares made manifest. Another unique aspect is the way these fleets utilize the warp to execute their attacks. Unlike conventional fleets, which must rely on precise navigation and calculated jumps, ghost fleets seem to move with an uncanny ease through the immaterium. They appear to have an innate connection to the warp, allowing them to emerge from it with pinpoint accuracy, often directly within the heart of a trade convoy. This ability to bypass traditional methods of detection and interception has led many to speculate that these fleets are guided by demonic entities, or even the will of the Chaos Gods themselves. Such speculation adds an air of inevitability to their attacks, as if no amount of preparation can truly counter their unpredictability. One particularly chilling phenomenon associated with these fleets is their ability to manipulate the minds of those they target. Crew members aboard merchant ships and even naval vessels often report hearing voices or seeing hallucinations long before the fleets emerge from the warp. These manifestations range from whispered promises of power to visions of loved ones calling out for help. The psychological toll this takes on the crews weakens their resolve, often leading to panic or mutiny before the actual attack even begins. This mental assault is not only a tactic of chaos, but a reflection of the warp's intrinsic connection to fear and desire, exploiting the vulnerabilities of those who rely on it for travel. The strategies employed by Chaos Ghost fleets are another fascinating topic of discussion. Unlike conventional raiders or pirates, their attacks are not driven by the desire for material gain, but by a deliberate intention to spread chaos and destabilization. They often target specific nodes within trade networks, such as supply hubs, relay stations, and jump points, disrupting the flow of goods across entire sectors. In some cases, they leave ships and stations partially destroyed, allowing survivors to spread tales of horror and despair. This tactic ensures that the psychological impact of their attacks far exceeds the physical damage they cause, as fear ripples through the Imperium's trade networks, deterring others from traveling the same routes. Another distinctive feature of these fleets is the presence of relics and artifacts tied to the warp. Some ships within the ghost fleets are said to carry cursed cargo, such as ancient demonic artifacts or warp-infused relics that radiate corruption. When these ships attack, fragments of this cargo are deliberately left behind, infecting the surrounding area with warp energy. This contamination spreads to nearby vessels, stations, and even planets, creating zones of instability that remain hazardous long after the fleets have moved on. These remnants serve as both traps for the unwary and beacons for further chaos incursions, ensuring that the damage caused by the fleets continues to grow over time. Perhaps one of the most enigmatic aspects of Chaos Ghost fleets is their leadership. Unlike conventional fleets, which are commanded by officers bound to strict hierarchies, ghost fleets appear to operate under the influence of mysterious, unseen forces. While some suggest that chaos warlords or champions are at the helm, others believe that these fleets are directly controlled by demons or even aspects of the Chaos Gods themselves. The lack of a discernible chain of command only adds to their mystique, as their movements and tactics often appear random, yet they consistently achieve devastating results. This has led some scholars within the Imperium to theorize that these fleets are manifestations of chaos itself, a physical extension of the Immaterium's will. Finally, the resilience of Chaos Ghost fleets is a topic of endless fascination. Attempts to destroy them often end in failure, as their ships seem to regenerate damage at an unnatural rate. Even when vessels are reduced to wreckage, there are reports of them reappearing months or years later, fully restored and more corrupted than before. This resilience defies conventional understanding of warfare and technology, reinforcing the belief that these fleets are not merely physical entities, but manifestations of the warp's chaotic energy. The cyclical nature of their destruction and return creates an ongoing threat that the Imperium has yet to find a way to permanently eliminate. These unique aspects of Chaos ghost fleets elevate them from mere raiders to symbols of the destructive power of Chaos. Their presence challenges not only the Imperium's ability to defend its trade routes, but also the galaxy's understanding of the warp and the forces that inhabit it. For fans of the 40K universe, these characteristics make the ghost fleets a compelling and terrifying subject of discussion, representing the relentless and insidious nature of Chaos in all its forms. Among those connected to the Chaos ghost fleets, a number of individuals stand out as pivotal figures whose influence, power, and decisions shape the fleet's operations and the devastation they leave in their wake. These individuals, often steeped in the energies of the warp, act as both leaders and symbols of the corruption that defines Chaos. Their roles, ambitions, and abilities vary greatly, but each plays a critical part in the fleet's ability to disrupt Imperial trade routes and spread fear across the galaxy. One of the most feared commanders associated with Chaos ghost fleets is a figure known only as the Phantom Admiral. Enigmatic and elusive, this individual is said to command a vast armada of spectral vessels that appear without warning to annihilate Imperial convoys. The Phantom Admiral is believed to have been an Imperial Navy officer who vanished into the warp centuries ago, only to return as a twisted servant of Chaos. Known for an uncanny ability to outmaneuver even the most experienced Imperial tacticians, the Admiral's strength lies in their intimate knowledge of Imperial fleet protocols and trade network vulnerabilities. This insight allows them to strike with devastating precision, often targeting weak points that others would overlook. However, their reliance on the unpredictability of the warp is also a potential weakness, as even their carefully laid plans are occasionally disrupted by the chaotic nature of the Immaterium. Another notorious figure is the Warden of Shadows, a sorcerer of immense power who is said to guide entire ghost fleets through the warp. The Warden's mastery over warp energies allows them to create storms and rifts that isolate trade routes and ensnare Imperial vessels. Their presence is often marked by the appearance of unnatural phenomena, such as sudden warp breaches or eerie voids where communication and navigation fail entirely. The Warden's strength lies in their ability to manipulate the Immaterium, turning it into both a weapon and a shield. However, their obsession with the warp comes at a cost, as their physical form has become increasingly unstable, forcing them to remain aboard their flagship, where they are surrounded by a retinue of demonic entities that serve as both protectors and jailers. Among the ranks of the corrupted is the infamous Captain Vorath, a renegade voidfarer whose name is synonymous with terror along the trade routes of Segmentum Obscurus. Vorath's fleet is unique in that it blends elements of Chaos corruption with the cold pragmatism of a pirate fleet. Once a rogue trader who amassed a fortune exploiting the fringes of Imperial law, Vorath fell to Chaos after a fateful encounter with a warp artifact. Now a figure of legend and fear, Vorath is known for targeting wealthy merchant convoys, stripping them of their cargo and leaving behind mutilated survivors to spread tales of horror. Vorath's strength lies in their cunning and adaptability, as they utilize both the powers of Chaos and their experience as a rogue trader to devastating effect. However, their greed and arrogance often lead them to overreach, exposing their fleet to counterattacks from more disciplined Imperial forces. The fleets themselves are often led by Chaos warlords whose ambitions align with the destructive goals of the Dark Gods. One such figure is Carrack the Whisperer, a charismatic and manipulative leader who commands loyalty through a combination of fear and persuasion. Carrack is known for using their fleets not only to disrupt trade routes, but also to spread chaos cults across the galaxy. Survivors of Carrack's attacks often report seeing broadcasts or hearing transmissions that speak of freedom from the tyranny of the Imperium, planting seeds of doubt and rebellion among the populations of targeted worlds. Carrick's strength lies in their ability to inspire both fear and devotion, turning even defeated populations into tools for chaos. However, their reliance on psychological warfare means that their impact is less effective against populations or forces that are highly disciplined or isolated from outside influences. An especially terrifying figure is the Seer of Wounds, a prophet of Nurgle whose fleets are carriers of plague and corruption. The Seer's vessels are riddled with contagion, and their attacks are designed to spread disease to Imperial ships and worlds. Entire trade routes have been abandoned due to the Seer's campaigns, as the fear of infection outweighs the need for supplies. The Seer's strength lies in their resilience, as their fleets are nearly impossible to destroy due to the regenerative properties granted by Nurgle's blessings. Even ships that are seemingly obliterated often reappear, more corrupted and deadly than before. However, the Seer's fixation on spreading disease rather than achieving material victories sometimes limits the strategic value of their campaigns, as their efforts can leave key objectives untouched in favor of inflicting suffering. Not all prominent figures associated with ghost fleets are warriors or commanders. Among the most mysterious is the figure known as the Keeper of Echoes, believed to be a warp entity that serves as a guide for the fleets. The Keeper is thought to dwell in the Immaterium itself, using its knowledge of warp currents and anomalies to direct ghost fleets to their targets. Its motivations remain unknown, but some speculate that it serves as a herald of the Chaos Gods, ensuring that their influence continues to grow. The Keeper's strength lies in its ability to manipulate the warp to its advantage, creating conditions that render even the most well-defended trade routes vulnerable. However, its ethereal nature means that it relies on others to carry out its will, making it susceptible to disruptions in the chain of command. These individuals, whether mortal, demonic, or something in between, represent the multifaceted threat posed by Chaos ghost fleets. Each brings their own strengths, weaknesses, and ambitions to the table, ensuring that the fleets are not merely random forces of destruction, but deliberate agents of chaos, working to destabilize the galaxy at every opportunity. Their presence ensures that no trade route, no matter how well protected, can ever truly be considered safe. The phenomenon of Chaos ghost fleets raises numerous unanswered questions and theories that captivate scholars, tacticians, and enthusiasts alike. These enigmas delve into the origins, mechanisms, and ultimate purpose of the fleets, leaving much to speculation and debate. In the grim darkness of the 40K universe, where knowledge is often fragmentary and shrouded in superstition, these mysteries deepen the terror and fascination surrounding the fleets. One of the most debated questions is the origin of these fleets. While it is widely accepted that many of them consist of Imperial vessels lost to the warp, some suggest that not all ghost fleets originate from humanity. There are persistent rumors of Xeno ships among the fleets, their forms twisted by the same warp energies that corrupt their human counterparts. This raises the possibility that the fleets are not solely a human tragedy, but a galactic one, encompassing vessels and races from across the stars. If true, it would imply that Chaos holds a far greater grip on the galaxy's interstellar travel than previously imagined, capable of ensnaring any who dare to traverse the Immaterium. Another unresolved question revolves around the fleet's connection to the Chaos Gods. While their attacks align with the destructive and destabilizing goals of Chaos, it remains unclear whether they are directly controlled by the gods or operate independently under the influence of corrupted leaders. Some theories suggest that the fleets are manifestations of the warp itself, acting as extensions of its chaotic nature without the need for direct divine intervention. Others posit that the fleets are tools of one specific Chaos God, with each campaign serving a larger, incomprehensible purpose in the grand schemes of the ruinous powers. The lack of definitive answers fuels endless speculation, as even those within the Imperium who study Chaos are divided on the matter. A particularly chilling theory concerns the possibility that the fleets are not entirely physical entities. Survivors of Ghost Fleet attacks often describe ships that appear and disappear without warning, their forms flickering like mirages or phantoms. This has led some to propose that the fleets exist in a liminal state, partially within the material universe and partially in the warp. If true, this would explain their ability to evade detection and strike with such unpredictability, as they could traverse dimensions in ways no conventional fleet could. However, it also raises the question of whether they can ever be truly destroyed, or if they simply return to the warp to regenerate and strike again. The motivations behind the fleet's targeting of specific trade routes are another topic of fierce debate. While their actions are often seen as random acts of destruction, some patterns suggest a more calculated strategy. Certain fleets appear to focus on disrupting supply lines to Imperial war zones, while others seem to target sectors already weakened by internal strife or Xenos incursions. This has led some to theorize that the fleets are guided by a higher intelligence, perhaps an overarching chaos entity or a council of corrupted leaders. If this is the case, the fleets may be playing a long game, using their attacks to weaken the Imperium's infrastructure over centuries or even millennia. A related mystery is the apparent variability in the fleet's strength and activity. There are periods when Ghost Fleet attacks seem to surge, disrupting trade across multiple sectors simultaneously, followed by long stretches of relative inactivity. The reasons for these fluctuations are unclear. Some speculate that they are tied to warp storms or other celestial phenomena, which may empower or hinder the fleet's ability to operate. Others believe that the fleets are regrouping and consolidating their forces during these lulls, preparing for even larger campaigns. Whatever the cause, the unpredictability of their activity adds to the difficulty of countering their threat. The role of the warp in the fleet's behavior also remains poorly understood. It is known that the warp is a realm of constant flux, shaped by the emotions and thoughts of sentient beings. Some theorists propose that the fleets are a reflection of humanity's own fears and failures, manifesting as tangible threats in the immaterium. If this is true, it would mean that the fleets are not just tools of chaos, but products of the Imperium's own psyche, an idea that carries profound implications for understanding the nature of the warp and its relationship to the material universe. One of the most controversial theories involves the fleet's ultimate purpose. While their immediate goal appears to be the disruption of trade and the spread of chaos, some believe there is a deeper, more sinister agenda at play. There are whispers that the fleets are laying the groundwork for a larger, galaxy-wide invasion, softening the Imperium's defenses and sowing enough instability to make coordinated resistance impossible. This idea is supported by the observation that some sectors targeted by ghost fleets have later become focal points for major chaos incursions. If true, it suggests that the fleets are not acting in isolation, but are part of a grander strategy that extends far beyond their individual attacks. Finally, the question of whether the fleets can ever be permanently neutralized remains unanswered. Attempts to destroy them have often failed, as their ships seem to regenerate or reappear after being seemingly annihilated. This has led some to suggest that the fleets are inexorably tied to the warp and can only be defeated by addressing the root cause of their existence, chaos itself. However, with the Imperium's limited understanding of the warp and its unwillingness to engage with it on anything other than a defensive level, such an approach seems unlikely. The fleets, then, may represent a perpetual threat, one that cannot be eliminated but only mitigated. These unanswered questions and theories surrounding Chaos Ghost Fleets add to their mystique and terror, making them a subject of endless fascination for those who seek to understand the grim darkness of the far future. Their very nature defies conventional understanding, leaving scholars, tacticians, and voidfarers alike grappling with the unknown as they attempt to navigate a galaxy haunted by the specters of chaos. The long-term consequences of Chaos Ghost Fleets on the galaxy are profound and far-reaching, reshaping not only the practical operations of trade, but also the broader dynamics of power, stability, and survival in the 40K universe. As these spectral forces continue to haunt and disrupt vital trade routes, their influence reverberates across every level of the Imperium and beyond, leaving an indelible mark on the galaxy's future. One of the most immediate and enduring consequences is the systemic reorganization of trade networks. The loss of established routes and the need to avoid regions plagued by Ghost Fleet activity have forced the Imperium to shift its logistical priorities. Entire sectors have become reliant on precarious alternative pathways, often through dangerous or uncharted warp zones, increasing the risks of navigation. These new routes lack the infrastructure and defenses of their predecessors, leaving them vulnerable not only to chaos, but also to Xenos threats, pirates, and natural warp phenomena. Over time, this strain on trade routes could lead to a decentralization of commerce, with some regions becoming self-sufficient while others are abandoned entirely. The psychological impact on the galaxy's population is another enduring effect. The tales of Ghost Fleet attacks, spread by survivors and amplified by rumor, have instilled a pervasive sense of fear and uncertainty. This fear undermines trust in the Imperium's ability to protect its citizens and maintain order, leading to a gradual erosion of faith in its institutions. Over generations, this could result in a shift in public sentiment, with more worlds questioning their loyalty to the Imperium or seeking to form their own alliances and defense pacts. Such fragmentation would weaken the Imperium's cohesion and make it more susceptible to internal strife and external threats. In the long term, the constant threat of Chaos Ghost Fleets could lead to significant technological and strategic adaptations. The Imperium's reliance on ancient, poorly understood technology has always been a limitation, but the unique challenges posed by these fleets may force a shift in priorities. Efforts to develop more advanced detection systems, stronger Geller fields, and innovative warp navigation methods could accelerate, potentially leading to breakthroughs that reshape interstellar travel. However, this progress would come at a cost, as resources are diverted from other critical areas, such as planetary defense or military campaigns. Another major consequence is the long-term destabilization of the Imperium's economy. The consistent disruption of trade routes affects not only individual sectors, but also the overall flow of tithes and resources to the core worlds. Planets that rely on off-world trade to sustain their populations and industries face economic collapse, which in turn creates a ripple effect throughout the galaxy. Over centuries, this could lead to a restructuring of the Imperium's economy, with some regions becoming centers of localized trade while others are left to decay. The loss of economic stability would further weaken the Imperium's ability to sustain its war efforts and maintain control over its vast territories. The Ghost Fleet's presence also accelerates the decline of sectors already teetering on the brink of collapse. Worlds cut off from trade often experience a cascade of failures, from food shortages to technological decay and widespread rebellion. Over time, entire regions may be abandoned by the Imperium, left to become lawless zones where chaos cults, pirates, and Xenos raiders thrive. This fragmentation of Imperial territory could create opportunities for rival powers, such as the Tau Empire or Orc warbands, to expand their influence, further destabilizing the balance of power in the galaxy. On a more philosophical level, the Ghost Fleets challenge the Imperium's perception of its own dominance. For millennia, the Imperium has maintained a narrative of unyielding strength and divine authority, but the Ghost Fleets expose the fragility of that image. The fleet's ability to operate with impunity and strike fear into even the most fortified sectors undermines the illusion of control that the Imperium relies on to govern its vast population. Over time, this could lead to a shift in the way the Imperium approaches its enemies, potentially fostering a more pragmatic and adaptive mindset. However, it could also deepen the Imperium's reliance on fear and repression to maintain order, accelerating its descent into authoritarianism. The fleet's influence extends beyond the Imperium, affecting other factions and the galaxy as a whole. Xeno species that rely on trade or share regions of space with Ghost Fleet activity face similar disruptions, which could lead to unforeseen alliances or conflicts. For example, certain factions might temporarily set aside their differences to address the shared threat of chaos, creating opportunities for collaboration that would have been unthinkable under normal circumstances. Alternatively, the chaos wrought by the fleets could exacerbate existing rivalries as factions exploit the Imperium's weakened state to advance their own agendas. In the grander scheme, the Ghost Fleet's continued activity serves as a stark reminder of the pervasive influence of chaos and the dangers of the warp. Their ability to strike anywhere, at any time, highlights the Imperium's inability to fully understand or control the Immaterium, a weakness that underpins many of its greatest challenges. Over millennia, the fleets may come to symbolize the Imperium's eternal struggle against forces beyond its comprehension, a struggle that defines the grim darkness of the far future. While the immediate effects of Chaos Ghost Fleets are devastating, their long-term consequences shape the galaxy in ways that are both predictable and unknowable. Whether through economic collapse, technological adaptation, or shifts in political power, the fleets leave an enduring legacy that reshapes the Imperium and the broader galaxy. Their presence ensures that the galaxy's future will remain as uncertain and chaotic as the warp itself, a testament to the unrelenting influence of chaos in the far future.